Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna explore the difference between component teams and feature team in software development. Let's start with an analogy. Let's suppose that we have to build a house and we have the options to choose between individual contractors to do each different part of the house. For example, the plumbing, the electricals and the carpentry. Or we can have the other option to choose a team that has already done this before in other places, has already built a house, and they can work together in parallel, and they know each other, they know how to interact with each other. Which approach do you think is going to be smoother and faster? This is the difference between having a component team and a feature team. But let's discuss a little bit more from a software development point of view. So component teams are teams that are focusing on a specific part of a system, right? So you can have a team that is focusing on the front end, or a team that is focusing on the back end, or exclusively on the API. And generally with these teams, developers develop a deep understanding of their technology stack in that specific context, but they also face lots of bottlenecks every time they have to deliver a feature due to the constant need of communication and collaboration with other teams. So essentially, we are limiting their autonomy to deliver a feature from idea to production because they don't have the necessary knowledge and probably also the domain knowledge about that specific feature. So in this case, it's a little bit like having subcontractors in the construction analogy, where each one is waiting on the next one to complete the work in order to start. So this obviously has a limitation. On the other hand, instead, a feature team is a cross-functional team. So a cross-functional team has a wider range of expertise within the team, where everyone understands a little bit of everybody else's technology stack. So you can have some people that have been exposed in the past to front-end, back-end databases and infrastructure. And when this happens, they can better communicate because they can understand each other. They can see things from a different angle because they have been in the other person's shoes in the past. So this allows for smoother communication and probably less conflicts, simply because they are also part of the same team, so they are collaborating and constantly trying to solve the next problem. So it's not now solve a backend problem, but is solve a problem. So that's also why I think it's very important to not use labels for our roles in software engineering. We should categorize ourselves simply as software engineers that have experience in different fields, not as backend engineers or cloud engineers or front-end engineers, or in some cases you can even see GCP engineer, or in case of Google Cloud, or you can see React engineer. So this is really limiting our options also from a career point of view, but we're going to discuss about the career point of view in a second. So the point I want to touch here is also related to some additional disciplines that we have in software engineering, like for example, domain-driven design. So probably if you are a software engineer, if you're watching this video, probably you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, there are search for videos about domain-driven design. There is a fantastic book authored by Eric Evans, and the name is Domain-Driven Design, so you can have a look at that. So in a nutshell, domain-driven design is a way to describe our software projects following some specific terminology and making sure that terminology is widely understood by different people. And you can have different contexts where there is a mapping between terms that are used at product level or engineering level. But it's also about understanding the domain and then let the domain drive your design. So now the point I want to make, if your domain, let's say you are working in a finance industry, your domain is about payments and other things, you want engineers to understand the domain in order to build feature where there is a deep understanding of the actual problem they're solving. Most of the time, if you don't have domain experts, you have difficulties in communication with, for example, product owners. So why I'm pulling in domain-driven design now? Because I think by having component teams, it's much harder to achieve a domain knowledge inside the technical team, inside your development team, because they're focusing mainly on the technology, not necessarily on the domain. By focusing on the technology, you can have experts, but then there will be always a misunderstanding between product and development, for example, or different component teams having to interface with each other because they may have a slightly different way of referencing at domain concepts. So in this case, as you can imagine, a feature team is perfectly suited for this because they have full understanding end-to-end of a specific feature, so they can use a common language, they can interface with the same product owner, so it's much easier for the team and also for the product owner, because in that way the product owner only has to coordinate with a single team and check on the work that they're doing, instead of trying to figure out which one is the best person that can help on one aspect or the other, and then trying to educate them in part of the domain. This will take forever to deliver any feature. So where I see this to be extremely valuable is essentially in allowing a better communication between development and product, and having this alignment is also helping teams to implement domain-driven design in a more effective way. The other aspect I wanted to touch is that a feature team will also allow a talent growth inside the team itself, because developers are constantly exposed to new problems and new technologies, and this is making them on one side domain expert from a product point of view, so from a business point of view, but is also expanding their horizons in terms of innovation, in terms of new technologies that they can introduce. And this is also having an impact on the retention for developers, and also the onboarding of new engineers. So if you have a new engineer that joins a team, in that team you're going to have all the domain knowledge that you need to start being effective, instead of having a team that is completely disconnected from the actual domain and they only know a little bit of technology. Having a good mix between domain expertise and technology is essential to move faster, to have a better pace. And the other thing is the communication. If you have one team that meets regularly, through those meetings, they will constantly share information about the work that they're doing and the domain of the team. So the last thing is that it's not always immediate to communicate this to the business, because this obviously has a big impact on the organization of the business itself. How teams are structured, how teams are taking on the work is essential for this, and this requires a deep change into the organization, which is most of the time hard to achieve, and it can be expensive. But I worked in an organization where we went from exactly one model, component teams, to feature teams, and we literally had to move people. Even the floors in the building were structured based on that. So we had a floor where we had the backends, a floor where we had the front ends, a floor where we had platform, enterprise engineering. So we had to reassemble the teams to have a little bit more cross-functional capabilities in each of one of them. And one thing that was essential was renaming the teams, because originally we had teams named after random stuff. So you can have superheroes generally, or you can have names of colors or other things. So I remember we had the purple team, but then we had an evolution where we started to have a member team. So the member was the actual user of the web application, or you have a payments team where they take care of the flow of the payments. You may have, as part of member, for example, the feature registration or login, but then as you can see, you have to touch all the components from the UI till the database. And this is where we started to accelerate in terms of delivery, because we didn't have to coordinate with any other team. So when we switched from one to the other, we realized that we can have a better understanding, and we can provide, for example, in case of backend and frontend, we can provide an API response that is one-to-one mapping with the needs of the frontend. So that was definitely accelerating our time to market. Probably now I am digressing a little bit, but let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're interested in other topics around platform engineering, you can check my other videos on the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye.